We'll report back.
All I want is you.
Minutes to assume the role of architectural detectives to pay close attention to some of the clues that are hidden throughout this living museum of architecture so that we can piece together how Chicago's really rich history, very colorful past, has literally shaped some of the buildings in the city that we stand in today. So do we have anyone on board who's from the Chicago area? Because the clock tower is modeled after the Giralda Tower of City Cathedral in Spain. Nowadays, though, we're all about site-specific designs that are custom-made for the environments that they're built in. So almost like the exact opposite of this revivalist style. And this newer style of architecture is called contextualism. And we see a really great example of contextualism coming up here in the Trump International Hotel and Tower. Stuff that you'll see coming out of Trump Tower sort of look like tears on a wedding cake or something, right? So these setbacks actually integrate the building into the neighborhood by matching the heights of other buildings nearby. So it doesn't look like it at the moment because we're up so close to it. But maybe make a little mental note. You can check it out later when we approach from a distance. This first setback with the people on it actually matches the height of the roof of the Wrigley building next to it. The second setback matches the height of the Mather Tower, which is this kind of rocket-shaped building next to London House on the other side of the river. And third setback matches the height of AMA Plaza, which is the big black box building coming up behind it. So this is the architects of Trump Tower recognizing that you could not have put this building in this exact place if not for the others that were built around it first. So that's contextualism. It's in conversation with its context. So it's all about blending in, harmonizing with the high-end residence and hotel. There's a top floor penthouse that just sold this past year for a crisp $20 million. If you're looking for something a little more affordable, a little more budget-friendly city living, coming up on the right here, we got the twin corncob-shaped towers of Marina City. And Marina City is an entire residential complex that was completed in the mid-1960s, designed by Bertrand Goldberg. And Goldberg was a bit of a social scientist architect. So he really believed that people should be living in cities. So he designed Marina City in order to get residents into the central business district of Chicago that we call the Loop, because of our public transit train system in the surrounding downtown area. And no one was really living in the Loop in the late 1950s, early 60s. So Goldberg wanted to draw them in by offering all the resources of an entire neighborhood in a single complex. So you have housing up at the top. There was parking right below it. There was an office building behind there. A former movie theater, just now the House of Blues. You got a restaurant, health club, a swimming pool, bowling alley, dry cleaner, enough place to park your boats. So everything you could possibly need all in one place. It was like a city in a city. And it worked. It was really successful in getting residents into this downtown Loop area. Walking over to the other side of the river, coming up next to 55, you'll see this lovely blue glass and white granite building. And I want you to draw your eye all the way up to the top of the building. So you see a triangle shape up at the roof there. Has these sort of pillared windows. And although it was built in the early 1990s, it's meant to embody the style of the classics. So they're using modern materials to evoke this classical Greek or Roman style. This is known as neo-classical architecture. So neo-classical architecture is different from revivalist. Revivalists are literally replicating. Neo-classical is a little bit about more about taking inspiration from the old. Of course, we see lots of folks out here this lovely Saturday evening on our Chicago River Walk here. So the River Walk's a fairly newer addition to our city. And it was created to draw together the loop over here to the River North area over here. So kind of tying those two areas together, but also creating a second shoreline that is over a mile long to lure people down to the river and raise people's personal interest in the river water quality. So the Chicago River is not known for being the cleanest body of water, but it is so much better than it used to be. We've been working really, really hard to clean this river up, trying to make it seem like it was all built at once. But that original part and that added annex work very well together, kind of exist in perfect harmony. So I think it is an excellent example of respecting our architectural heritage. Saying, yes, when they went to design structural support for this building, that support needed to be entirely above ground to accommodate said trains. They were also inspired by the arch in St. Louis. So we're going to take a quick little dip up the north branch of the river. And I promise we'll talk about this bridge very obviously sticking up in the air in front of us on our way back. But first I'm going to talk about this kind of peachy pink, salmony colored building ahead of us on the left side of the river. So this peachy pink colored building is Fulton House. And this is actually the oldest building we'll see on our tour today. So it was built in ages after visiting Budapest. I'm seeing some residences along the way, and I'm going to find that same aesthetic. However, the properties was kind of nuts for building those houses. Not just because of the quirky aesthetic, but for trying to put homes on this north branch of the river. Because at the time, this whole river, but especially this north branch, was like this stinky, sketchy, industrial part of town where no one wanted to live, including Willis's wife. He actually couldn't convince her to move into one of those cottages. But he had a real hard 30-foot setback from the river for public access, left a buildable site that was only 39 feet wide, which is not very much. So it's such a small area of buildable space available. The Edge Partners took on the challenge, they got a little creative, and they decided to build a core-supported structure. So you can think of it as like a central concrete spine to hold the core elevator system. Then traded steel or concrete beams about 10 feet in diameter were drilled 120 feet below ground, sunk 5 feet into Chicago's bedrock to provide a stable foundation in what is pretty swampy soil. So what we have now is a tall building with a very narrow base and a super windy city. See any problems with that? See, this building can actually sway back and forth in the wind. Similar to the upper pillars, Disney nauseous. And this is a pretty common issue with tall structures here in Chicago. So our guys had the Bank of America building dealt with that. They decided to vault the third floor here with these giant tripod-like legs to comply with that river building requirements, which I think is a super clever solution. Also kind of doubles as an event space. There's always like work, happy hours happening up there. So the next series of buildings coming up on the right here were built chronologically and do a really good job of showing us the evolution of architecture in the U.S. on the 20th century. So ideally right here at the start of the timeline, we would have the Wrigley building, so early 1920s in that ornate European revivalist style. But the first one we can see here is 2 Riverside Plaza. So built in 1929, it's another excellent example of Art Deco design. So it's massive, it's jazzy, snazzy, optimistic for the roaring 20s. Until the 20s stopped roaring, because what happened to the U.S. economy in 1929? The stock market crashed, we fell into a great depression. And then not too long after that, we entered into World War II. So this chain of events left a giant gap in construction with virtually no commercial office buildings built around the country from around 1930 to 1957. And then, when construction did resume in the late 50s, architectural priorities have shifted. They've changed. These are now children of the Great Depression, right? We just been through a war, so thrifty, frugal, not super concerned with adding bougie unnecessary decorations like cartwheels and clock towers. But rather, they just wanted to strip the building down to its core essentials, not just the skeletal stuff. Sounds kind of fancy, but really, it's just such a generic building that it could probably be picked up, placed anywhere else in the world. Still probably fitted, right? Still kind of makes sense in any other century. Now, as we roll into the 1980s, there's a cultural shift. The world's changing, our buildings are changing. So the final installment in this Gateway Center series is Gateway Center 1984 from 1983. Notice how it curves along with the curve of the river. So we're finally out of the box. We're constructing buildings with reflected glass, which I've never really been done before. It was something new. Getting kind of crazy. So coming up on the left here is another black box building that we honestly never talked about on our tours until this mural was added to the rear, because it is a giant map of the Chicago River. And this red Lego piece you see up there is us, or where we currently are. So basically making it a really big "you are here" map, in case we get lost. Like how the sun's hitting it right now. If you look up towards the top, you see that Y shape up there. So that's Wolf Point, where we just came from. And you see us trekking down the South Branch. If you have any Batman fans on board, you might not be alarmed. We'll report back. So as we continue trekking a little further down the South Branch of the river, I want to tell you guys a story. I want to tell you this story of how Chicago really shaped into the city that it is today. And this is a story in 3 parts. So part 1, right now, we're drawing near the origin site of arguably the most formative event in our city's history. This beautiful city in front of us that inspires us and stirs your soul. Because this guy and many others, they dare to dream big dreams, right? They went above and beyond an apartment or most apartment buildings in the city. Kind of already have this city within a city quality to it, but today we call them amenities. But Colbert was really the first person to think of that concept. So ahead of us on the right, you can see this black boxy building. It's a little harder to see these when it gets darker, but it sort of looks like it has these gray Legos popping out of it. So this is 235 Van Buren. It is a residential building completed in 2010, designed by Perkins and Will. And those gray Legos are balconies. And the pattern of those balconies is supposed to look like a real car and semi-truck traffic, as the building on the side goes higher. So even though you can't see the balconies as well, it's in defense against the wind and just one single column. So like I said, the Willis Tower is the tallest building in Chicago. When it was completed in 1974, it was the tallest building in the world. And it remained the tallest for 24, almost 25 years. And it was the tallest building in the United States up until 2014, when construction on One World Trade Center in New York City was completed, and that surpassed us to the title. So going back to the name. So Sears Department Store left the building in the late 80s, which is still a bummer, so it was a big Chicago employer. But it's still a spike on top of it that is called a spire. Technically, a spire is not considered an antenna at all. It is considered a decorative design choice. Like, as in, it would not be One World Trade Center without this spire, so that's translates to sticky onion. Yes, New York doesn't need Big Apple. So the second city, like Riverfront mentioned, is the one reason we burnt down the first one. And of course, known as the Windy City. I'm sure you've all heard that before. And it is actually super windy here sometimes. However, this name, with the actual theater part of the building being in the seat of the runner armchair, so meaning right now we're by the backstage area. And real quick, I want everyone to take a look at both sides of the river. So these two buildings were built the exact same year, 1929, and they have a lot in common, right? They're both huge, same color, general vibe aesthetic is the same. However, there's one major difference between these two buildings. So Riverside Plaza is embracing the river, while the Opera Building is quite literally turning its back on the river. So like I said, back in the day, this river was like the shame of Chicago, so no one wanted anything to do with it. And that was really the first building to embrace the river, to incorporate it into the architecture. And of course today, people want to live along it, walk along it, eat along it. It's hot real estate, but that was not always the case. So I always like seeing those right across from each other just to really illustrate just how much our attitudes towards this river have changed over time. Over on the left curves really nicely along with the curve of the river. We use this reflective glass to make the whole Wolf Point neighborhood look good. Also also used two different shades of glass, including the continental water and the sky. So this is the new Bean building from 1983. So way ahead of its time. And it's another great example of how a building can conform to its context, which of course we all now know is called contextualism. Yeah, this building's also in the US. So we got the heads of Marshall Field.
After they get there, they'll just go to the back. Ever since putting them down, I should say, they're
Glass box mounted to the wall, and that glass box is a very fancy 8-inch projector system. And every single night at 9 o'clock p.m., it projects digital animated art onto the entire face of the emergency. So that it's actually asymmetrical, because there are 1, 2, 3, 4 ways of windows to the left of the clock tower, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ways of windows to the right of the clock tower. So the building was originally symmetrical when it first went up back in 1914. Then in 1930 they widened LaSalle Street back there in accordance with Daniel Berg's plan for the city and chopped off. So that's how we built it. Also we have headquarters for Encyclopedia Britannica there, which I find some people are surprised to learn is still around. Coming up on the right-hand side, I want you to check out this kind of short, stocky building nestled between these two supermodel skyscrapers. So 55 West Wacker over here. Some of our docents call it the Danny Judo building. Built in the later 1960s, it is a great example of realism-style architecture. So it's made with heavy, raw, industrial materials, small, dark windows. Concrete is usually a pretty dead giveaway of brutalist architecture. And in general, brutalist architecture expresses this kind of security, this nervousness, which is why you'll oftentimes find it a carbide-and-carbon building from 1929. And it's truly like a metaphor for the lavish decor of the roaring 20s here in Chicago. So the building is made with real 24-karat gold leaf at the top that is roughly half the thickness of ceramic. So it is real gold, it is just very thin. And this building was built by the Burnham brothers, so sons of Daniel Burnham. And they built this back at the height of Prohibition. And this was originally constructed to be a high-tech office tower for jewelers, with the lower 23 floors serviced as an automobile elevator. So that was straight from the ground floor of their office without anyone squeaking in. So we've been under quite a few bridges today. We've got a lot of bridges here in Chicago. The next one we'll be going under, the one ahead of us, is DuSable Bridge. And DuSable Bridge is named after the founder of our city, Jean-Baptiste Condisable. And as mentioned, he was by no means the first human on this land, but DuSable was our first non-native settler. So he was a Haitian Creole immigrant who arrived in Chicago via New Orleans back in the 1770s. He actually married a Potawatomi chief's daughter, and together him and the chief set up a little trading post just ahead of us on the left where the Apple Store is now, which I always find kind of funny. He's considered the father of our city, so you'll notice a number of things that named after DuSable. So I want you to imagine yourselves this trading post over here on the left. But of course, today we got the Chicago flagship Apple Store, which was completed in 2017, designed by Foster and Partners. And they use this low iron load-bearing glass and then a very lightweight carbon fiber roof. I think looks a lot like an iPad, perhaps a little MacBook. And then ahead of us on the left, I spy a peacock. So we got the NBC Tower. If we're looking at the clues on this NBC Tower to try and guess what style of architecture it's in, well, it has those vertical lines, that Indiana limestone coloring, those deep inset windows. That looks like it could be Art Deco, right? And Aqua Tower used to be the tallest building in the world, designed by a woman. So Jeannie Gay just literally beat her own record right next door. This is gorgeous, right? Skyline appearing behind you. will be appearing in front of you in just a moment. So if you do feel like standing up and taking some photos, now's a really good chance to. We have a couple minutes. Also, last opportunity to visit the bar restrooms before we head into them. Carcasses were probably ending up runoff, raw sewage, dumping everything in the river. And this was not very sustainable as the river was flowing out into Lake Michigan, which is also where we were getting our drinking water. So by the 1800s, diseases running rampant around Chicago. In 1880, we actually won the title Cholera Capital of the World. Not a good look. So they hatched this plan to reverse the direction of the river. And in 1900, they completed the Sanitary and Ship Canal, which is a 28-mile-long canal that connects the south branch of the Chicago River to the Des Plaines River. And it works because this canal is much lower than the river, much lower than Michigan. So it simply uses the force of gravity to act like a straw and suck the river backwards. Speaking of happily ever after, I do hope you all enjoyed your time on the boat tonight. I think this is a lovely evening for a boat ride. It's always cool to see this tour because you get like a little bit of like the day to night look. You get both sides of the city. Something totally new when the lights are lit up. And the trash is accumulated. There'll be a trash can right when you step off. And so we're looking for anything. They do also check around for any belongings. But if you took photos before you boarded, and those are available to view when you get off to the left. I'll also be standing up at the top of the steps when you get off. So if you have any questions that you didn't get to ask or I didn't talk about or any feedback from me, I'm more than happy